It's an honor to be here today in Nashville. My name is Stephen Krein. I'm the co-founder, along with Unity, in Startup Health. For the last 12 years, we have been on a mission to improve the health and well-being of everyone in the world by inspiring and educating and empowering a global army of entrepreneurs and innovators who are committed to solving the biggest health challenges of our time. 4 of those entrepreneurs are up here on stage. I'm going to join Unity Stokes, my co-founder, in a great, very timely discussion about the impact that artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, and AI is having on healthcare and really the world. And it's been a couple of months since it seems like AI has taken the world by storm and kind of reached mainstream, but obviously it's been many, many years in the making, and there's no better people than these 5 to talk about that. So please enjoy this session today, and we're excited to kick off the Startup Health section of the ViVE conference.
Thanks, Steve. My name is Unity Stokes, as Steve mentioned, co-founder of Startup Health, and it's my great privilege to be with 4 amazing health transformers today at, I think, a really important time in history. I was thinking over the past few weeks about the moment that we're in. And 3 years ago, I think, with the creation of the vaccine and COVID, we bent the arc of time in terms of people's perception in how quickly something like a vaccine can be brought to market. And I think what we've seen, even though many of us here have been working in the field of AI and health innovation, leveraging a lot of AI technology or chatbot technology over many, many years, what we see more recently is a complete transformation in terms of the age of AI and what that may mean for our future. So very much looking forward to this conversation today. But just to kick off, I'd like each of you all to introduce yourselves and your company, and to give us some context of who you are, the innovation you're working on, and then we'll dig into the discussion. Yusuf, you wanna start us off here?
Absolutely. Good afternoon. Yusuf Enriquez, founder and CEO of Indigenous AI. We're an AI drug discovery platform that's driving precision health equity within Black and Brown community and increasing diversity in clinical trial, including women across all ethnic background. As you know, most of the drug discovery and the pills that you take have been approved on 95% European white males. And so we've seen in the era of the vaccine over the last 3 years, there's a need to move to a more diverse biodiversity amongst clinical trial participants. And so Indigenous AI is trying to lead that charge within women and minority communities in order to have better efficacious drugs for all globally. Thank you.
Victor.
Victor Wang, founder and CEO of Care.Coach. I originally started Care.Coach to solve senior loneliness just based on my family experience with my grandmother, but then what we realized was we successfully did that, and actually creating relationships with people unlocks a lot of healthcare value. And so these days we're scaling human touch to improve the health and well-being of millions of people. And as you can imagine, there are interesting applications of conversational AI.
Missy.
Hi, I'm Missy Lavender. I'm the founder and CEO of Renalis Health. So we're creating software-based solutions for pelvic health disorders, and we're starting with persons assigned female. We're very conscious that there are a lot of pelvises out here that are not assigned female, and we'll get to you later, but because 2/3 of the conditions and 2/3 of the cost is borne by people assigned female, we're gonna start there. So our platform is named CC, and we have 3 conditions that we're addressing with a conversational agent.
Christian.
So I'm Christian Pascual. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Medictor. And we solve an unsolved problem in the world, which is the first step in healthcare. Typically, you will use Google to find your symptoms and try to understand what to do next. We solve this problem in a reliable way, building up the most accurate artificial intelligence-based chatbot for triage and pre-diagnosis. So in essence, we drive patients to the right level of care, providing this service to payers and health systems, driving more efficiency to the system and also helping patients to navigate healthcare.
Excellent. So you're all in completely different areas. You're all using innovation and technology in completely, I think, different and transformative ways. Let's get really practical first, and help us understand how you're using AI or chatbots or these new innovative technologies. And if you believe, maybe shed a little color on if you believe we're living in kind of a unique moment, or it's more of the same, because many of you have been innovating in these areas for many, many years, real innovators here. So Yusuf, you want to kick us off in terms of practically how you're using AI technology in what you're doing and where you think we are.
Yeah, absolutely. So our core basis is looking at the human genome. And so you have about 3 billion genes in your body. We can't do that by hand. And so our core, we sequenced the entire human genome, whole genome sequencing. And so in our practical world, we're able to use AI and machine learning in order to read for mutations, gene mutations within an individual. And that leads to two things. We can start now with AI and machine learning that has been, over the years been trained. We can start looking at the genetic mutations in multiple conditions, such as PTSD, looking at the genes that are associated with mental health and the dysregulation of genes. And so what we've been able to do is to speed up early detection, early prevention using AI and machine learning at Indigenous AI, because once we sequence your entire 3 billion genes, that's all you've been given. And we're now able to look at patterns and train models to start identifying where you may have predisposition or gene mutation that may lead to, cancer, which is, again, a big help if you're starting to identify these as stage 1, stage 2. Unlike, what normally happens in healthcare right now, you find that out at phase 3, phase 4, which is irreversible and pretty much terminal at that point.
And I think you're also doing something that's very important. I think the data sets that AI is using, if there's only a certain set of data, then that can be, a big problem. So you're, I think, coming at this from a much more holistic perspective that I think is fundamental for all humans. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the bias. So, what we're starting to see now, these AI machine models, they need to be trained on what the population looks like. Unfortunately, the drug trials and the normal set of data is predominantly, again, European white males and white, predominantly white. And so you start to see some of that creep into AI, where there's a lot of bias in some of this data that's being provided. So you're starting to see technology are not picking up, outside of what it's been trained on. So to your point, we're starting to make sure that diversity across, the technology, the participants, those all play a part in making sure that, it represents what, the population that's going to be taking these medication, the type of, telehealth and technology that's being used to treat individual has a good lens of what the general, public looks like, and not just one demographic and ethnic background.
And Victor, you, for many years, many people didn't know what AI was when you started. In fact, I remember the previous iteration, JerryJoy. Maybe get practical here in terms of your technology, which when I was at Health, I got to use, and this was before I was playing around with ChatGPT. So
I'm glad you mentioned JerryJoy, Unity. So I'm kind of a stereotypical technologist coming out of MIT, but actually when I started this company, when I started Care.Coach, it was 2012. And as a technologist, I didn't believe that AI was good enough to, keep your grandmother company. You could give your grandmother like Alexa or something, but you probably shouldn't feel good about, not calling her as much just because she has some AI. So what we've actually done for about 10 years is solve this caregiver crisis, scale human touch by leveraging global workforces. So we've actually hired people in the Philippines, Latin American countries for staffing in Spanish, and you can go talk to our avatar at the AARP Age Tech Collaborative, where we have a booth there. And that's been our product for about 10 years, where we have these human-staffed, human-to-human, empathic conversations with typically older people with multiple chronic conditions, dementia. And as a result, you mentioned the data, right? So we have a very special data set now where we've been talking with people from this kind of empathic standpoint in a healthcare supportive role with years-long relationships, like praying with people in the evenings, wishing them good morning, actively listening as they talk about something stressing them out. And so as a result, we've been able to lead the wave as generative AI has kind of taken hold. Actually, we did our first public demo of our new generative conversational AI product called Care.Coach Farah at HLTH prior to the launch of ChatGPT, for the record.
I was there. I saw it.
And yeah, and actually I have to thank the National Institute on Aging, because their funding is kind of what kickstarted all that R&D around applying AI to the rich data set that we have.
I want to come back to you in a second. See if anyone's fallen in love with your chatbot yet, because we have been reading stories about this that are very real.
We have a policy where the avatar or Farah is not supposed to say "I love you," but we have a lot of clients who tell the avatar "I love you," and then we're allowed to respond and say "I love you" too. But we're never the one to start it.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's very common.
Yeah. Well, Missy, completely different use case for you. Maybe share a little more insight in practical terms of how you're using this technology.
So Cece is a therapeutic. So she is meant to treat a disorder, so gather data, put the patient on a care pathway, check in, evolve that treatment as necessary, and then pass the patient on or launch them into the world. And we're finding her to be extremely effective. And what we need are data sets. So anybody out there in the audience that comes from a large health system that is looking for solutions that could use their data, very definitely we are all ears, because we have machine learning right now. AI is starting to come as we're building our product. And we're looking at some open source data for sure, and some data with wearables and other things that are important to us. And in our second product, she's already evolving beyond the basic care. So right now, it's a pretty tightly controlled interaction with the patient.
Christian, you had, I think, one of the first symptom checkers that I had played with going on maybe 10 years. I don't know exactly how many years, but it's been a long time. How is this technology changing your business? How are you leveraging this technology in practical terms?
So, well, we were talking before. I think that ChatGPT just changed overnight how everybody was perceiving AI, because before it was like, oh, you have to explain that this will solve real problems, and now overnight everybody sees that, oh yes, this can solve for sure problems. So it's much easier now to sell AI to all the clients, and everybody understands that we can do a good job.
Because they've touched it, they feel it, they've tried it themselves. So I think that's kind of what I was thinking when the world saw the vaccine speed change. Now we all believe it's possible. Now that we've all played around with whether it's ChatGPT or Bard or whatever, Character.ai or any of your tools.
You can go talk to Farah at the AARP booth.
Let's
go, generative conversational AI.
What do we need to understand? What do investors, regulators, industry, the people in this room need to understand, both about the potential of what you're all doing, but also the transformation of what's going on? I think you started to dig into some of these some of these topics around the importance of the broadness of the data set itself. But what are some of the most important things that you all think we need to be really understanding at this moment of transformation?
I think it's really the speed of what AI is able to do to accelerate. In my world, it's drug discovery. So a lot of the pharma companies are now looking at AI to speed up drug discovery because we now have these tools that are now being proven out and validated. From the FDA regulatory standpoint, we now have AI models that were able to rapidly detect the lungs during COVID. So these are things that were needed in a time of need. And so I've been able, like you said, to be able to touch and feel and see the result of what AI was able to do. We're now seeing more openness, even from the regulatory standpoint, of getting some of these, AI models trained on healthcare, different disease areas, so that we could start assessing and doing early detection, early prevention. I think in my world, that's where the biggest driver is. And so what we don't want is, regulations and other things to slow down that innovation, because it's what's able to drive and save a lot of lives. Right now, rare disease, indigenous AI is focused on a few rare disease areas within women's health, like polycystic ovary syndrome, endometriosis, and uterine fibroids, and also retinal disease that are just not well researched and are understudied.
I wish those were rare diseases, but they're not, unfortunately.
Right. And so these are things that are understudied in minority communities and women. And so we're able to show that with our, with the AI platform that we're creating and the diverse population that are now, are needed in order to drive what we're calling precision medicine and personalized medicine forward.
Yeah, can I interject on that one? So one of the things that's interesting in our space is that if you have an out-of-control bladder, it can be a predictor of diabetes, for example. But somebody has to ask the right questions and have the interaction and be able to flag that before they're diagnosed as diabetic, for example, or there's hypertension that bleeds over to bladder. But we're finding some really interesting and compelling findings beyond just our space that the addition of data and machine learning and AI are just going to accelerate. And I think that very often in healthcare we silo ourselves to be just about this part of the body or this part of the body or this part of the body. And I think that's the most interesting part about AI, is that it opens up the person, right? And is able to say, let's flag this, let's look at that, and get somebody diagnosed more quickly and get them to the right care faster, as we were talking about earlier.
It's actually a pretty interesting technical aspect of the machine learning. So if you're interested in the technology behind ChatGPT, it's called a transformer, kind of like a healthcare transformer. But the very interesting thing about transformers is unlike more classical neural networks, where you would train a model for one specific purpose, and if you tried to be too broad about it, then you for example train a model to detect something for cancer in the liver, and then you try to apply it to detect cancer in the eye, and it wouldn't work because you would get what's called like sparse inputs. Like the stuff that represents the liver isn't in the stuff that represents the eye, so like the models wouldn't work well. But an interesting thing about transformers is that they handle that type of situation really well. So you throw a bunch of data at the transformer and it learns from it all, and it can kind of generalize. That's kind of how ChatGPT works. It's learned from the entire internet and because figured out how we use language. And so I wonder if there will be healthcare applications that allow AI to be more like holistic and like person oriented because of the underlying nature of the technology.
So when you're dealing with something very specific, whether it's conversations with someone you know, or in your case, diagnoses or symptom checker, does that make it easier to use this kind of technology? Because it's, when you go into Bard or ChatGPT, it's like I play around with it and try to do anything I can possibly imagine. Basically, try to break the system. And Yusuf, you mentioned like safety, you mentioned regulation, the speed with which this is happening is very, very fast. I know that in the past 2 weeks, I've read terrifying columns from Noam Chomsky to, Harari to Bill Gates to, many, many people. So the pace is here, but you're also all working in very contained ways where I think there's an opportunity to refine the technology or leverage the technology in very specific ways. Is that helping you, or how are you all thinking about this?
Well, I think that, as I said before, ChatGPT changed our mind in what is possible. But when it comes to healthcare, then we have to take seriously what are the outcomes that an AI can provide. And in a general bot like ChatGPT, it's totally unsafe to rely on the results because, well, they claim it when you enter. It may show results that are not correct because it's not a trusty source that bring out that. So that's not applicable to healthcare at this point. Maybe in the future they will train it differently, but I think that we are not obsessed with the technology. We are obsessed with the problem and the outcome. And you're right, we are not solving a general problem. We are solving a very specific problem, but we try to provide the best outcome possible for that problem. And we combine different technologies, NLP, machine learning, AI, and in healthcare we'll talk a lot also of systems that are white box and black box on AI. So you can explain the results and why they are shown or not. And this is when you need to convince a chief medical officer of a corporation. That's a serious conversation. I mean, if you cannot explain why a result was shown, that opens up a lot of questions. If you have a white label technology that you can say, yo, this is the outcome because of this. So I think that, yes, we have great times ahead, but we'll see general systems and specific trained systems to be extremely accurate and safe for specific problems.
How
I
are
think,
you?
yeah, I want to just add what Christian said is that we have to keep in mind, the customer we're serving. So our users are very important to us, obviously, but we're solving pain points for providers, and they want to have something that's efficient that can potentially detect some things that it would take them a lot of time to do. So we have bumpers in our conversational journey within CC to very definitely hit what they want to hit, and then, for example, take a patient down the care model and add additional care. But I think, like you were saying about a large, big use of conversations or journeys or whatever is interesting. It's fun, to serve. But when you're in healthcare and when you're specifically dealing with this particular problem, I think you just need to remember it's got a container that's important for it. That makes sense.
Also, I have to kind of disagree with you, Christian, because here at Care.Coach, we actually have, one of the things we have to do is pick up on like unsafe things happening in a conversation. For example, if somebody starts to talk about suicidal ideation, or like they talk about a concerning medication interaction as opposed to just like, oh, they have a cold or something like that. So we have to pick up on these unsafe situations and very, very well. And actually, so if you're familiar with metrics, there's something called the receiver operating characteristic, and you look at the area under the curve, and we've been able to achieve in excess of 0.9 area under the curve, which is basically competitive with like cancer diagnostics. So we can take in an unstructured, free-form conversation about anything whatsoever and detect these unsafe situations with a level of precision and accuracy that rivals cancer diagnostics. So the technology is getting pretty interesting.
So we've got about 5 minutes left. Let's talk about where we go from here. The future. We've all talked about how fast some of this is moving. There's a lot of safety issues to balance. There's a lot of opportunity. How are you all thinking about the future in relation to what you're doing? And are you optimistic more broadly in terms of how quickly we're able, Yusuf, you mentioned cancer and rare disease, and being able to leverage this technology and maybe move faster than you thought even 2 years ago. Give us a sense, each of you, on how you're thinking about the pace of innovation. Are you optimistic? How do you see the future from where you stand today versus a while ago.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely see the benefits of AI, especially in where we are, because again, as you mentioned when we started off, you know, I was at the FDA working in the health space. It took 10 to 15 years to get a vaccine approved. So to watch something in real time go from 0 to less than 12 months, we had 3 to 4 EUAs and vaccine developers that were able to create vaccines to help, you know, with the pandemic. So in that essence, you can see the future of what, you know, this technology, AI, machine learning is able to bring within the AI, you know, drug discovery platform, and helping pharma to kind of move some of these, you know, cutting edge, innovative, you know, therapeutics, especially now that we're moving into cell and gene therapy. The only caution I have is that, you know, again, it needs to be inclusive. And so at Indigenous AI, that's what's the lag for me, and where I have a little bit of hesitance is because we just can't keep doing what we've been doing the last 40, 50 years in drug development for the participants and the drug discovery that's done to be on one particular group. And so, you know, that's an area where, you know, again, if the data doesn't represent the individual that's on this panel, then, you know, that data is then biased, and a group is going to be left out that's not going to have access to some of these care. So while you know, again, the future is bright for AI and helping to bring some of these novel technology therapeutics to the market, for me, the biggest concern and why Indigenous AI spends a lot of time is making sure that women and minorities are included, so that these unique you know, chatbots and ChatGPT have that recognition that, you know, we have a diverse population that's the AI has been trained on, so therefore we're getting, you know, as accurate of what the population looks like and predicting.
Well, thank you for helping change that, because clearly the data sets have not been inclusive to date. So thank you. Each of you, we only got a couple minutes, so very quickly, thoughts on the future.
Kind of like with Indigenous AI, we take it as a responsibility here at Care.Coach to make sure that, like, older adults, disabled people, you know, very complex people, low income people, they're not left behind by this transformation in AI. Like, generative AI is evolving so quickly. The future is bright in general, but if healthcare takes as long as it generally takes to employ these types of technologies, it's going to get so far behind so quickly. It's like, we can't let that happen. So we take it as our responsibility at Care.Coach to take our 10 years of data with human-to-human interactions, like detecting these unsafe situations in a human-to-human driven way, suicidal ideation, all these things, and create a conversational AI that can scale human touch, impact millions of lives, but do it right, you know, before somebody screws up with the AI, and, you know, healthcare stays away from the technology again, and we just get so behind. Like, we can't let that happen with how fast generative AI is evolving.
Yeah, and to follow it, we've been in the conversational agent, as we like to call them, versus chatbots, because everybody thought of chatbots, right, 5 years ago. Best Buy, sorry, no offense. But now understanding what a chatbot is and why a conversational agent is important is resonating. But more importantly, to the points that we've been talking about, it's about inclusion to us. You know, equity and access in pelvic health, in women's health, in anybody's health that's not a European white male is a big deal. And so we're developing, we like this technology because it plays well across SES, it plays well across ages and stages. And we've been committed to it for 6 years. And I think, you know, there's noise around the ChatGPT and things that kind of makes it seem silly, but it's really important stuff when it's applied right. So we're excited about it.
Thank you for the work you're doing, all of you. Christian, bring us home here.
So I'm sorry to say that we are facing a global pandemic right now, and there's no vaccine for it. It's the lack of professionals in healthcare, and that's global, and it will not get away in the next 10 years to come.
Clinicians.
Everybody in healthcare, it's missing a lot of people in the world. So we need technology to bring efficiency, scalability to the system. So I see a bright future on all these technologies that can provide a more efficient healthcare for everybody, because we will need that for sure. And On my field, my prediction is that in the near future, you will remember this day because you will not be able to see any professional in healthcare in the world without talking to a AI chatbot before to guide you who you should be talking to.
Well, thank you all for the extraordinary missions you're on, the work you do. I hope you all get a chance to meet these extraordinary founders and health transformers. They'll be in the Startup Health Pavilion. Thank you all very much.